The Signal is a sci-fi action, horror, suspense, thriller, independent film about a group of college students who are trying to track down this hacker named Nomad, and as they get closer and closer to finding this person, some event happens that causes them to black out and awaken in a facility where they're being tested. And then more things happen, and plot twists, and a whole mess of stuff occurs, which may be polarizing to the point where you either are very intrigued and enjoy the movie, or end up sitting through an hour and a half of something that you may be very disappointed with. But the one thing that this movie definitely does right is that the director is also a really good cinematographer, so the movie looks phenomenal, especially from the beginning. You get these scenes that seem a lot like Place Beyond the Pines, especially with the flashbacks that they have. As the sci-fi continues to get even more, becomes more of a big deal in the movie, it seems a lot like Wally Pfister's work, especially in Transcendence, at least the good parts. And then you get the moments later on in the film which bring up a lot of action, which are very reminiscent of District 9 mixed in with Chronicle. And there's these really cool action scenes that you don't get too much of, but enough of when you're watching the movie. The acting in the movie is also pretty good, except for the point that no one does necessarily anything bad. It's just that the script doesn't give them enough to work with. You don't necessarily, even though they have flashbacks that don't do much, to actually care more about the characters or to know much about the characters to the point that they have much to work with. But you have the main character who's played by Brandon Thwaites, who's been in several movies and I believe is going to be a really big star, especially with a lot of the upcoming works that he has. He does, again, a pretty decent job. It's just that the flashbacks that they give him, a lot of the lines that he is given, don't really develop his character much. You have his buddy in the movie who plays his hacker buddy who's trying to help him out to find this other person. And for a moment I thought that he was actually the kid from The Sandlot all grown up, but it turns out that that's not him, and technically he would be a lot older than that. However, the character that the buddy plays is that he's there in and out, and he's pretty funny. He's got some funny moments in the movie, and especially towards the end of the movie, he's got some pretty epic scenes that he has. There's also Lawrence Fishburne in the movie, who's practically going off his Morpheus vibes to... he's practically the one who's giving him the test, and he's trying to figure out what these kids have, and he practically should have just said the question, do you choose this pill or that pill? The girlfriend in the movie, while she has some parts in the beginning, towards the end, she practically is emotionless, and she's just there. But what I do give credit to the movie for is that it was something that was very intriguing. It's interesting. The final payoff may not be the best thing possible. However, the movie does have this build-up to be something intriguing, something that's at least different than all of the other sci-fi stuff that we see around. And you may be confused with what the ending is, which is why I want to get a little bit more into it and a lot of the things that they had throughout the movie. So I'm going to get into the spoilers section. Definitely go watch the movie if you haven't. Definitely go watch it. Let me know what you think about it down below as we get into the spoilers and as I cover the things that happen in the movie from the beginning. Starting off with, now that we're in the spoilers section, you see in the beginning that they're trying to have this road trip to find this person, this hacker named Nomad. And the cool thing that they have in the beginning is that you see when he's coming out of the convenience store, he tells a little kid, hey, he's playing that claw game, and he's like, you know what? You need to do this in order for it to come down and pick you up. Pretty much alluding to the fact that the alien robot things at the end of the movie are abducting them in that one scene that you see as they get into that cabin in the woods type place where it all of a sudden turns into sort of a VHS Blair Witch Project found footage thing. However, one of the mistakes that I did see in the beginning of the film, even though it looked beautiful, was that they were supposed to drop off the girl in college. Yet they say, hey, we're going to drop you off, and then we're going to take your car. That was one thing that I felt was pretty weird. However, you get to that point where they're finally there in the cabin in the woods type of little thing, and they're trying to find who this person is. And it reminded me a lot of that scene in Breaking Bad in the beginning when they're battling Tuco. Anyways, they're there and they're trying to figure out who this Nomad person is. And then you obviously see, alluding back to them getting abducted, when they come out and you're hearing the signal, which happens throughout the movie, and the girl's getting picked up. She's pretty much getting levitated, being sucked up, absorbed into the spaceship or whatever it is that they had. And that scene alone was bringing up ideas that I thought were pretty cool. For one, the fact that these aliens, or maybe demons, whatever it could be, was luring them there through technology. The fact that these text messages, these hacks that they were getting, was from another, dimension or another species that was trying to interact with us humans. And I thought that that was creepy in and of itself, and that's where the little horror and thriller parts came from. And I thought that just focusing on that would have been cool. Obviously what you get is that they awaken in this facility, which again, now that we're in the spoilers, we can talk about. That is all just a facade. It's them really in the spaceship that's pretending to be this Area 51 to make them believe that they're being tested on, to make them believe that these are all just humans and really they're just robots. Now, this is where it gets pretty, not necessarily confusing, at least in my eyes, but it gets to the point of why. Why would these aliens take these specific people out of everybody and then take them all the way up there and experiment on them? And why is it that they do these things on them? For example, it was cool to see that he believes that they might have done it to him, or maybe it was the cause of the alien interaction that he had. Obviously, it was both because they are the aliens. And you see that they sort of fix his legs. But why, or technically, what is it that they wanted to do with giving him those robotic legs? Yes, they're fixed, but then there's the fact that they gave his friend, different hands. Even though it made for a cool scene, there was nothing necessarily, at least as far as we saw, that was wrong with his hands. Then for the girl, you see that they put something like in her bag. She had something like a spine thing that they put in there. I don't know what it did, other than, completely drain her from emotions. But the question just comes up of why did they specifically take them, and what exactly were they doing with them? There's also the fact that, again, they had all of this facility there that they were just pretending, the spaceship pretending to be Area 51, and they had all those other people there, where those people just picked at random to be like decoys in there, where they failed experiments. You see that one of them was very delusional and he believed that he was with his family, and then they just kill the person. There was also the old lady, that old lady you never want to be stuck in an elevator with. She was there, and she was technically helping them escape from a place that she would know is inescapable, because she would have been outside, and unless she was crazy, which she obviously was. Again, it goes back to the purpose of why were those specific people there, and then why would they kill them if they had a purpose for them there? It brings me to what I think is the biggest gripe in the movie, and that's the fact of them not necessarily having a specific direction to where it was going. It's cool that they have all of these things happening, like, oh, it's an abduction story, and it's all, supposed to be a twist, because you don't know that they are necessarily the aliens, but I think what they forget to do is the purpose of it. Like, for example, you have those flashbacks that continue to happen, and then they just pause it, and then you see the flashback again, and it's just like a millisecond of what he's doing, and then, the rest of the story. And then it goes back to the flashback, to the point that these flashbacks were just not working, because you necessarily didn't get anything other than them pausing the main story to get him looking at a river. And then the main story, and then him looking at a river. And then you don't necessarily get the outcome to that, other than that it was supposed to be like a metaphor of him breaking through that barrier at the end. So by the time you get to the conclusion and you see that they abducted them and they have him there, they don't necessarily show you what happens at the end. It was like it was all built up to have that big twist, but then they're still there, so what is it that they're necessarily going to do? What did they do with the girl that got abducted? What about the kid that they gave him those arms, and then he obviously just dies because everything explodes? And the main guy who's got the legs, what are they now going to do with him since he's there in that spaceship? They just show you the big twist, and then it just ends. What are they then going to do about it? Maybe that's where the tagline, "Are you agitated?" comes in. Pretty much, saying, "Are you mad, bro?" Maybe because, you technically didn't get all the answers you wanted. And I wish that the movie would have had that. Again, it's a very good idea, and I feel that the director's definitely going to have some good stuff in the future, because he has this really good shots. He has a really good premise to it. It's just the way it was executed. I wish it would have had more like a sort of enemy type vibe, and where everything had a specific purpose to it, but it felt like many things were intended to have a specific purpose, but they weren't necessarily thought out. For example, when they let him escape, or try to escape, there's obviously cameras all over the place, and they just let him do that, or talk to the friend, or the fact that he's got the numbers on there, which equal up to Area 51, obviously to confuse him to that, and again, the purpose of why he was there, and all of the decoys that were there as well. I wish that those would have been answered a bit more, and it would have made the film a lot better. Again, I enjoyed it because it was something different than what we usually get, but obviously it could have focused on that a bit more with answering the questions that it just left hanging. However, if you were still confused with what the movie was trying to portray, or all the twists in the movie, there is this show on Adult Swim, which pretty much had an episode that has the same premise that this movie has, but in a 22-minute episode, and does it very comedic to make fun of that, the premise of you being in a sort of simulation, and it does it in a comedic way, so it's a lot easier to understand. It's definitely one to go check out if you were still confused with this movie, and even if you weren't confused with the movie, definitely go check it out, because it was a pretty funny episode as well. But let me know what you thought about this movie, if you were able to catch it, because I know it's in very limited release. Let me know if you were able to see it in theaters, or probably later on demand or DVD. Let me know what you thought about it, whether you liked it or you didn't, the different things that were in the movie that you probably found an answer for, or pretty much just anything having to do with this film. Let me know your thoughts down below, along with any other movies, and until next time, I'll see you guys later.